In this video, I'm going to show you how you could build a $41 Prossh Skyraider of Kher commander deck. Let's get started. Quick shout out to Patrick Lenu, sorry if I butchered your name. A while back they left a request for a Prossh deck tech, so thanks for that request, Patrick, and here's my best effort. Total cost of this deck was just under $41 as of the day of recording. Prices were checked using mtgstocks.com. Do note that prices fluctuate, so they may be above or below where you see them listed at in this video. And this deck is 1DH legal, meaning all the cards in the deck are $1 or under, with the exception of the commander, who can be up to $5. Prossh is a 6-to-cast 5/5 flyer with 2 abilities. The first one is that whenever you cast Prossh, you get to put X01 Kobold tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the amount of mana you put into Prossh. So the first time you cast Prossh, you're going to get 6 kobolds. And then he comes with an activated ability that you can sacrifice a creature to give Prossh +1/+0. We're going to primarily key in on that ability to generate an instant army by getting us 6 kobolds and then 8 and 10, generating progressively more kobolds each time you cast him. We also have a few ways that we can generate gradual tokens over time. Then once we've built up an army of a bunch of little creatures, we're going to play pump type effects that can increase our entire team's power and then hopefully swing in for lethal. If that isn't quite getting us there, we also have some big flyers that can help us get over the top of our opponent's grounded creatures. This deck is sporting a very large mana ramp package in the hopes of being able to cast Prossh multiple times. That way we don't really care so much if he gets removed, because it will be easy for us to bring him back, once again getting us more kobolds. And then also, in addition, we're running a handful of mana sinks, allowing us to kind of control the board until we can get our army in place and draw into those pump type effects. First off, we're going to talk about Accelerants in the deck. We are running 13 of them. We have sorceries such as Search for Tomorrow, Rampant Growth, and Cultivate, all of which help us to get an extra land onto the battlefield early. Search for Tomorrow comes with the upside of being able to suspend it for a single green, and Cultivate not only gets us 1 land to the battlefield, but also an additional land into our hand. Sakura Tribuilder, Diligent Farmhand, and Dawn Treader Elk all help us to get extra lands onto the battlefield early. We also have a few cards that care about creatures dying, so these sacrifice effects can help us trigger those cards. Font of Fertility is the same, but on an enchantment, and Viridian Emissary is a 2/1 that when it dies helps us search out a land from our library and put onto the battlefield tapped. Yavimaya Dryad and Wood Elves get a forest from our library to the battlefield, and This is Pilgrimage is the same as Cultivate, except that it gets 2 forests, 1 to the battlefield, 1 to our hand. If we have Spell Mastery, meaning we have 2 instants and or sorceries in our graveyard, we get a second forest to our hand. Springbloom Druid and Harrow are very similar in that when we play them, we have to sacrifice a land, and then we get to put 2 lands onto the battlefield. The Druid's lands come in tapped, whereas of Harrows come in untapped, and you can cast Harrow at instant speed. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards specific to our game plan. We are running 12 of them. Obviously we have Prossh, who we're hoping to use to generate that instant army, but some other token generators that are very effective are the Dragonlair Spider, as well as Verdant Force. The Spider gets us a 1/1 insect anytime an opponent casts a spell, and the Verdant Force gets us a 1/1 Saproling at the beginning of each upkeep, so not just our own but our opponents as well. Once we've got that token army in place, we're hoping to use effects like Overrun, the Great Oak Guardian, as well as Torrent of Souls to pump up our team and hopefully knock players out of the game. Overrun comes with the addition of giving our creatures trample, whereas of the Guardian we can play at instant speed because it has flash and leaves us with a 4/5 creature with reach. And then the Torrent of Souls allows us to reanimate a creature, give that creature as well as all of our other creatures haste, as well as +2/+0. Here's a couple other pump effects that come with a secondary mode. We can either use the Return of Wildspeaker to pump our team or to draw cards, and as well as Hit and Run. Hit can help us to force a player to sacrifice an artifact or creature, although I never used it for that in playtesting, because Run is my favorite of our pump effects, as it gives all of our creatures +1/+0 for each attacking creature. If you use this just with Prossh, so you got Prossh the first time you cast him and his 6 kobolds, you attack with all of them, they are all getting +7/+0, which is a significant pump, can easily knock players out of the game if they are not prepared for it. Prey Caesar Dragon is another way for us to weaponize those tokens. As it enters, we can sacrifice X creatures, and then the dragon gets 2+ counters for each creature sacrificed. When we attack with the dragon, we can deal X damage to any target, where X is the number of plus counters the dragon has. Can help us control the board, or just swing in for so much that we're knocking players out of the game. Skyraider High Priest is another way for us to generate tokens and also take advantage of the extra creatures that we have lying around, as we can tap the High Priest as well as 2 other untapped creatures to create a 5/5 demon creature with flying. We can only use it if Morbid is in effect, meaning that a creature has died this turn. Creating a 5/5 flyer once per turn cycle can really help us close out the game and apply extra pressure to our opponents. Mirror Shield is here just to give our most important piece hexproof, and the Desecration Demon would probably be the first place I'd look if you wanted to swap cards out, as it doesn't really synergize too well with the deck. I just put it in here because it made for a great attacker or blocker, as it's a 6/6 flyer. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards that interfere with our opponent's game plan. We are running 23 of them. To help us remove our opponent's creatures, we have Terminate, Ravenous Chupacabra, and Death Sprout. Terminate blocks our opponents from regenerating, where the Death Sprout helps us to get an extra land to the battlefield tap. Tragic Slip, Murderous Cut, and Price of Fame are all conditional pieces of removal. Tragic Slip allows us to give a creature -13/-13 as long as the creature has died this turn. Murderous Cut can cost a single black as long as we're willing to delve or exile 4 cards away from our graveyard. And Price of Fame has a cost reduction as long as we're targeting a legendary creature with it. Also allows us to smooth out our draws, as we can surveil 2. Fleshbag Marauder, Merciless Executioner, and Plague Crafter help us control the board by forcing each player to sacrifice a creature when they enter. Plague Crafter comes with the upside of also being able to hit planeswalkers as well as cards in our opponent's hands. Gourmand is a similar effect, as it forces us to sacrifice a creature when we cast it, and then when it enters the battlefield forces each of our opponents to sacrifice a creature as well. Leaves us with a 5/5 flying trampler, which also helps us take advantage of those extra bodies we have lying around. Butcher of Malakir forces each of our opponents to sacrifice a creature anytime one of our creatures dies. And Priest of Forgotten Gods gives us a way to repeatably force our opponents to sacrifice creatures, as we can sacrifice 2 of our own creatures and tap the Priest to force each of our opponents to sacrifice a creature as well as lose 2 life, allows us to draw a card, and also gives us 2 black mana. Here's a few of those mana sinks that help us to control the board. We have Dark Impostor, Drana, Calastria Bloodchief, as well as Flameblast Dragon. All 3 of these allow us to dump mana into them to remove our opponent's creatures. The Imposter gains the activated abilities of any creatures that he's removed. Drana can pump herself up, dealing tons of damage. The Flameblast Dragon can not only destroy creatures, but can also hit planeswalkers and players as well. Reclamation Sage and Slice and Twain help us to destroy problematic artifacts and enchantments. Golgari Charm here comes with 3 modes. I was typically destroying an enchantment during playtesting. However, being able to regenerate each creature comes in handy if you need to protect your board. And then a 3rd mode of being able to give all creatures -1/-1. Acidic Slime and Return to Nature give us more artifact and enchantment hate. Acidic Slime can also destroy lands, and the Return to Nature can give us targeted removal on somebody's graveyard, which is great for taking away a piece that they thought they were going to get back. Nihil Spellbomb allows us to exile any one player's graveyard and can also draw us a card. Putrefy allows us to destroy an artifact or creature, and then we have a modal card in Status or Statue. Statue allows us to destroy an artifact, creature, or enchantment, and then Status gives a creature +1/+1 as well as Death Touch. Status comes in handy when you have an opponent swinging into you. You can just throw one of your tokens in front of it, give that token +1 and Death Touch, and then essentially you've gotten a kill spell for a single green or black mana. Next up, we're going to talk about the cards that provide consistency to this deck. We are running 11 of them. We have Explore, which draws us a card and hopefully allows us to play an extra land, as well as Elvish Visionary, which draws a card when it enters. Underworld Connections is going to draw us a card at the cost of 1 mana as well as 1 life. Colossal Majesty is going to draw us a card at the beginning of our upkeep, as long as we can keep a creature with power 4 or greater on the battlefield. And Outpost Siege is going to give us access to a card for a single turn cycle if we choose Cons, exiling that card off the top, and then we can play it for the rest of that turn. Or you may just choose dragons if you have a big enough board or are generating enough tokens, as whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, Outpost Siege deals a damage to any target. Moldervine Reclamation allows us to draw a card each time one of our creatures dies, also gains us a life. Death Reap Ritual is going to draw us a card at the beginning of the end step if a creature died this turn. Genesis can help us recur creatures from our graveyard back to our hand. Mimic Vat can help us get extra ETB type triggers off of our own creatures and give us sacrifice fodder, or possibly give us the ETBs of our opponent's creatures. Occam Adversary and Indulgent Tormentor don't necessarily provide us card advantage, but I found in playtesting they usually do, as the Adversary, a 2/3 with Death Touch, whenever it deals damage to a player, draws us a card, so it can be used offensively or defensively. And then the Indulgent Tormentor, a 5/3 flyer that allows us to draw a card at the beginning of our upkeep, as long as an opponent doesn't want to pay 3 life or sacrifice a creature. Lastly, we're going to talk about the lands in this deck. We are running 41 of them. Grim Backwoods, Kessel Wolfrun, and Skarg the Rage Pits all allow us to tap for a colorless. The Backwoods gives us a sacrifice outlet, whereas of the other two allow us to pump up our creatures as well as give them trample. Kessig Wolfrun is amazing here because it's another mana sink. We can just dump a bunch of mana into any token we don't care about dying. Then we can swing with a giant creature, which can really help us apply extra pressure to our opponents. Myriad Landscape and Blighted Woodland can also tap for a colorless, but allow us to accelerate our mana production, as we can sacrifice them to put 2 basics onto the battlefield tapped. Helps us also thin our deck as well as fix our colors. Mosswar Bridge provides card advantage in that we get to hide away a card when it enters, allowing us to cast that card at a later time as long as we have 10 or more power. Ash Barrens, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse provide more color fixing as well as deck thinning. Command Tower, Vivid Crag, and Vivid Grove give us all 3 of our colors. For black and green, we have Foul Orchard, Golgari Rot Farm, Jungle Hollow, Temple of Malady, and Golgari Guildgate. For red-green, we have Gruul Turf, Kazandu Refuge, Rugged Highlands, Temple of Abandon, and Gruul Guildgate. As for basics, we're running 10 forests, 7 swamps, and 2 mountains. Average converted mana cost of this deck was 3.37. There you can see the curve. Keys to victory. First off, we don't want to abuse Prossh. Really have a game plan for when you put him out. It is okay to just play Prossh and be fine with him getting removed if you have tons of mana and you're planning to just use him to get more kobolds, but I found it beneficial to have a plan when I put him out, either have a pump card in hand, ready to use the following turn cycle, or have a way to take advantage of those extra bodies, sacrificing them to get card advantage, or force my opponents to sacrifice their own creatures, or just giving me extra bodies that I can use as chump blockers to buy me time. Secondly, if you have a fog player in your playgroup or at your table, you're going to be spending a ton of mana to try to outpace them. If you're dumping 5 mana into your pump effects and then they're spending typically 1 mana to fog that, you're losing out on tempo. So what I recommend in that case is use your flyers to slowly whittle down that fog player or force those fog effects out of their hand, and use your pump effects when you're swinging big into other players. Lastly, do the math another time. What I mean by this is you don't want to be drawing into your pump spell, have a bunch of tokens out, and then be trying to do the math right then in that moment. Because if you cannot deal lethal to your opponents, they're going to know that you are close and you're going to become threat number 1 to them. So just know that your pumps are either going to pump all your creatures +2 or +3, and try to do the math while they're playing out their cards and figure out how many creatures you need to swing in with on each of your opponents to knock them out of the game. Here are a few cards I would consider if I were to go above that $1 price point. If you want to see some more ideas, check out the link in the description below. Better yet, share your thoughts in the comments what card you would upgrade with. That way, others can see your brilliant ideas and alter to their liking. If you liked the video, you should give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you do, make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss any of the new weekly content from Budget Commander. Otherwise, you can check out the video in the top right or either of the playlists on the bottom.